It doesn't seem like it should be that hard to answer this question, but my experience over lots of years is that it is a difficult question to answer. The question is, and oh, by the way, the question is of very little, probably no importance, unless you are an active part of a congregation of a church that it is structured in a way that I think it conforms with New Testament theology and New Testament patterns. Anyway, the question is this: what is an elder supposed to do? They meet. Yeah. So when they meet, what did they do? They pray. Okay. Good. Let's check that one off the list. So that's it. Honestly, in all the congregations I know of that have elders, that's not all they do. They are a decision-making group, in my experience. All right, what are they supposed to decide? Now, this is where the waters get a little bit muddy. And I shared with you before that one of the more challenging and difficult enterprises that I've been involved in was when I tried to help a group of sincere, committed, really godly, thoughtful elders through a process of defining what their job was. The default was to come back to, well, what's in the Bible? Well, here's the thing about what's in the Bible. It is really clear the character of an elder. It defines that, it describes that in no uncertain terms. Paul wrote to Timothy and Titus, and in his letters, he offers a very clear picture of a man. Sorry, ladies, but there's a lot of different interpretations to that, and I'm not going to get into that aspect of it at this point, but it describes, let's just say it describes a person whose character is one of the identifying marks, according to Paul, is they are above reproach, meaning you can make accusations against them, but you can't substantiate it because their behavior and their lifestyle it's good. It's clean. He goes on and he offers a ton of other things, and we've used these checklist sheets where each one of those character qualities are identified and put into kind of a grocery list, and the candidates for elder are supposed to go through and mark for themselves whether they feel like they're meeting that expectation, that requirement. There are even groups of elders who are bold enough that they do what is known as a 360-degree evaluation. So they evaluate one another on these things. It's very time-consuming and requires a lot of thought and a great deal of courage. But I think it's a very smart thing to do. Yet it doesn't answer the question, so what is an elder supposed to do? Okay, we know what an elder is supposed to be, who they are supposed to be, how the expression of their life is supposed to look like. We know that. That's well defined. What their role is, okay, now we can, the Apostle Peter gives us some good help on what is their role. And we find that where we've been looking here for the last couple of times in 1 Peter chapter 5. I'm going to read it again, beginning in verse 1. To the elders among you, I appeal as a fellow elder and a witness of Christ's suffering, who will also share in the glory to be revealed. I didn't touch on this before, but I think it's worth looking at that he's a fellow elder, so he's identifying with them and saying, I'm one of you. And then he says, oh, yeah, and here's something you guys aren't. I am an eyewitness of Christ, and not only just, some of the things he did. I am an eyewitness of his sufferings. And if you want to dig into that a little bit and you read in the closing chapters of the Gospels, you realize that part of Peter's story as a witness of Christ's sufferings was his denial and then his restoration. Well, there's a lot to that. And then he said, who also will share in the glory to be revealed. That this is also, how do I want to say this? This is not a mark that sets him apart from all the other elders. This is just a statement of fact. People who have identified Christ as the Lord of their life, the owner, the absolute king, authority, the sovereign of their lives, they will share in the glory to be revealed. And yet, when you read the book of Revelation, it's so hard sometimes to parse out what is symbolic and what is literal, and I don't know the best way to do that. But one of the things that the book of Revelation says is that the apostles are going to somehow be designated in a particular way. So here's Peter in that designation. Well, okay. Then he goes on, here is your role. Be shepherds of God's flock that is under your care. We're in America and the West in general, shepherding is not a very common thing. I grew up in cowboy country, right, in Oklahoma, where it's all about cows and crops. But you have to drive quite a long ways from where I live to find anybody who's raising sheep. In Jesus' day, in Peter's day, in the part of the world where they lived, there were people who were raising cattle and crops, but they were not the majority. The majority of livestock in that culture was sheep. And a shepherd their role is to give care to the sheep. And one of the ways that they give care is they guide the sheep to safe environments where there is grass to eat and where there is water to drink. Psalm 23 is a great word picture for the role of a shepherd, where David writes, the Lord is my shepherd, I will not be in want. He leads me beside quiet waters. He makes me lie down in green pastures. The work of a shepherd is to help provide, to lead the sheep where their basic needs can be met. Now, on a spiritual level, and David was talking about a spiritual level. He's not talking about God guiding us to literal green grass to lay down in, or literal quiet waters to drink. And that was symbolic of how God, as our shepherd, leads us, guides us to where our needs can be met. The elder, in a New Testament sense, serves the role of a shepherd in guiding people so that they can be in environments where their needs can be met, their basic spiritual needs can be met. I work with an organization here in Edmond, Oklahoma, that is called True North Ministries. It's a men's ministry, and I love their mission because they their mission is not to win the world. Their mission is not broad and expansive. It's simple. The mission of True North is to provide in my environments where men can hear from God. Okay. So, and they do this utilizing some things that appeal to men. I mean, they do it, they structure about a 72-hour experience for men, not boys and not women, men, where in that environment, things direct them, guide them, lead them to hear from God in a way that most men are not hearing from God in their normal lives. Not that they can't, but that they don't know how. They've never even, most of these guys have never even experienced it. So in a way, that means we, at True North, we shepherd people into environments where they hear from God. I think that's a whole lot what the role of an elder is in a church, to shepherd people toward environments and help provide environments where people can hear from God. Now, a shepherd, generally shepherds are notoriously gentle with the sheep. You don't drive sheep, you lead them. And that's a lesson for elders in any church to bear in mind. You don't drive sheep, you drive cattle. People, from a biblical perspective, are not cattle, they're sheep. And so you lead them. There are sheep who stray. And again, back to Psalm 23, your rod and your staff, they comfort me for two reasons. The staff was usually a stick with a crook. And the reason for the crook is because if a sheep strayed and got into some kind of trouble out of basic reach of the shepherd could take the staff, put the crook around the neck of the sheep and pull them toward them. It was just a tool, right? The rod was a weapon, and it was used in two ways. One way is that it was used to defend the sheep against predators, wolves. In the Middle East would have been lions, and it's a little bit unclear to me whether those would be what we think of as cougars and mountain lions, or whether they would have been African lions. It doesn't really matter. Predators. They would defend them by, using it as a weapon. And there are times when the shepherd might even use that to smack a sheep. There are stories of shepherds who, when a sheep was in this continual pattern of straying and leaving the herd, they would, awful as this sounds, they would actually break a leg of the sheep and then set it and bind it so that the sheep couldn't stray, physically wouldn't be able to get away, would be forced then to stay with the herd. Now, I don't think that necessarily means that elders, as shepherds of God's flock, should use a rod and smack people to break their symbolic limbs and keep them in the flock. No, but there is this aspect of the role of a shepherd that they are a protector. Now, here's, again, we're looking at a role and more or less a context, but we're not looking at specific job description activities. And that, believe it or not, I got more to say about that, but I won't do it until next time. So I hope you'll come on back and join me for next time on Soul Care with Stevie Boy.